name is Lord Cataldo Querini from the Kingdom of Atlantia, and I'm going to show you the unmaking of an animal for my Hunting 101 class. So after you've shot your animal, it's wise to give it some time to expire, usually about a half hour. Otherwise, if you rush up immediately after shooting it, it may get up and run away for another 2 or 3 miles. In that case, you might lose your game depending on your tracking ability. So after you've given it some time, you want to walk up on the animal cautiously, usually from behind it, to make sure that it's actually dead. A good way to tell is its eyes remain open and its chest isn't moving. Personally, I usually give it a good poke with a stick to see what happens. In period, what they would do to ensure that an animal was dead is they'd shoot it in the head with a bow or crossbow, or use a long dagger and stab directly through the top of the back into the heart. Before I get started with the unmaking, a quick note on how to time unmaking your game. In the winter, if it's about less than 50 degrees, you can wait up to about 12 hours for processing, especially if the animal has been shot in the gut. In warmer weather, you need to process the game as quickly as possible to avoid spoilage. After you've ensured that the animal is dead, the first step is to roll it onto its side and position yourself on the side of its belly. Then, taking your knife, lift up the tail and cut a circle around the anus. Pull out a couple of inches of intestine and free any fecal matter that might be inside. You can then tie off the intestine on itself or use a piece of string. After this, you'll move on to the abdominal cavity, which is a space behind the ribs and in front of the back legs. On a human, it'd be like your belly. I like to start from the notch on the ribs and move backwards, taking care not to puncture any intestines, the stomach, or the bladder. Next, remove the bladder entirely and tie it off. If there's urine in the bladder, drain it into a separate container. It can be saved for future hunts to be used to mask your scent or to attract other deer. You can then use the empty bladder and inflate it with air to be given as a balloon to children. This is an entirely period practice that continued on up until the 20th century. Moving back to the intestines, using your knife, make a series of small cuts to separate the intestines and organs from the abdominal cavity. They can be scooped up and out of the way. Try not to puncture anything, because it'll smell very bad and there's a chance that some of it could spoil the meat. After you have your abdominal cavity cleared, cut through the diaphragm, and this will be the part where there'd be a lot of blood, and let some of the blood drain away. At this point, if it's your preference, saw through the rib cage to one side of the sternum on the other. I usually go with the top side because it's easier. This will increase access to the chest cavity, but be very careful because broken rib bones are very sharp and will easily cut you during this process. Next, in a similar fashion to what you did for the intestines and organs, do the same with the heart, lungs, and liver. You'll notice they're all connected up here, up the chest cavity towards the neck. Being very careful not to cut yourself. Reach deep inside and cut through the trachea and the esophagus. At this point, you should be able to clear everything out. At this point, generally, you should set aside a couple of things that you can eat, such as the liver and the heart. Some people also eat the deer's tongue, but that's a little bit later in the butchery section. You can also use the intestines as casings for sausages and the brains for tanning leather. After this has been done, you can then pack the animal with snow to help preserve it overnight while it hangs so the blood can drain before butchering. This is just one way to process a deer, or in our case, a unicorn. But there are several schools of thought and ways to do this, but the general principle remains the same. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to come to my class.